Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare.
He yelled at him to stop. The man bent backwards and started to dislocate all his joints and crawl towards them. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Redditors who have seen a UFO, Bigfoot or any other creepy creatures. What is your story and how did the people you know react to your story?
Number 1.
When I was about 10 years old, I went on a field trip with my 4th grade class to a summer camp. For the most part, it was a typical experience. Rafting, bad food in the mess hall, hiking, campfires, etc. Hell, one of my friends did the typical movie thing and brought dirty magazines from home. We were supposed to be there for 4 days, I only lasted about 2. It was late at night cause I stayed up to do the trash duty and clean the mess hall. After I picked up the final granola bar wrapper, I made my way to the showers to clean up before turning in for the night. Halfway through, I hear a loud shuffling sound outside the showers. I stop what I'm doing and listen intently, but the shuffling stops. I assume it's my friends pranking me as they typically do, and get out of the showers. Just to put this into perspective, the showers and the boys' cabins are a good walk away with no way to illuminate your surroundings. That's why they shower before dark and with groups, to make sure nobody gets lost. For someone like me who's by himself having to navigate his way through the woods, it's pretty effing terrifying. To make matters worse, the flashlight I brought was back at the cabin. So I was stuck having to navigate my way back with a piece of dirt cheap lantern that barely gave me enough light. So anyway, I grab the lantern, and start my walk to the cabins. About halfway through I hear this ungodly loud moan coming from right the F in front of me. I panic and drop the lantern, running in the opposite direction of the sound. I can't see anything and in my haste I fall on something. I examine the thing I fell on and realize it's squishy and soaking wet. I hear the moaning again from behind me and book it to the direction of the cabins. I'm instantly greeted by 3 flashlights and concerned looks. Apparently the other campers heard the moans and the counselors went to investigate, only to find me covered in head to toe in effing blood. They brought me back to the cabins and I'm immediately bombarded with questions about what I saw. My friends shut them up after a while. The next day I went home. Could you blame me? I was not gonna stay there after all I've been through. I almost forgot about this incident until a while ago when I was reminiscing about this with one of my friends who stayed at the camp. I asked him what happened after I left and what he told me sent a shiver up my spine. Apparently after I left, the moans at night got louder and closer to the cabins and freaked everyone the F out, and as for that big mound I fell on, while the counselors were investigating the source of the moaning, they found a deer on the trail I was on. The head was ripped clean off, and its entrails were laying in a separate pile next to the carcass. That's my encounter. To this day, it remains the scariest experience I've ever had in my life. Everyone I've told thinks that I'm bullshitting it, but my friends who were there always defend me. I still don't know what the F was in the woods that night.
Number 2.
Finally, a chance to tell my story. About 10 years ago my family and I were up in the White Mountains of Arizona to cut down our Christmas tree. My dad was driving our truck with my grandpa in the front seat, and my mom and sister in the back seat. I was in the bed of the truck along with our family's German short-haired pointer. We were driving along a forest road, and all of a sudden my dog started barking and growling. So I looked to see what it is, thinking it is maybe a bear or mountain lion. What I saw was a tall dark figure walking parallel to the road about 60 to 70 yards away. I yelled at my dad to stop the truck. When I told him I think I saw Bigfoot, he just laughed and continued to drive. When I looked back to get another look at it, the figure had changed directions and was walking away from the road. The last thing I saw was the thing's head disappearing down a hill. To this day I still do not have an explanation for what I saw. Every time the situation comes up, my dad always makes me tell everyone my story, just so he can laugh at it.
Number 3.
Commenter. I've lived out in the middle of nowhere for about 10 years. I'm a smoker and a night owl. I smoke outside. So I've seen some strange things. Distant points of light changing course and shooting off at extreme speeds. Probably meteorites deflecting off the atmosphere. I really don't think a visiting intelligence would have lights on a spacecraft. I've seen several instances of things like this. Maybe a dozen or so times. But the one thing I've seen that gave me chills and baffled me was a black oblong object, think cylinder/thermos, floating through the sky. It was darker than the night sky behind it, utterly silent, and maybe I'm misremembering, but I recall the night being completely silent too. No crickets, no cicadas. Just silence. This was in the middle of summer. I told my family, and they just shrugged their shoulders. Person B. weird? My husband described a very similar experience to me about a year ago that he had late the night before. It was a massive black object flying in utter silence. I vaguely remember him trying to wake me, but I sleep like a rock. The only difference was that he described it as chevron/boomerang shaped with several lights along the bottom. Made him pretty uneasy. Yes, right after he told me, I showed him pictures of a B-2 bomber thinking the same. He said it wasn't a triangle shape, more of a V, no center. Maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him and he just couldn't see the center, but who knows? We do live about 3 hours away from Malmstrom AFB, so it's always a possibility. Commenter: yeah. It definitely unsettled me. I had this feeling of deep, almost instinctual, I can't think of any other way to describe it, fear. Where you feel cold all over. I couldn't tell how big it was a completely cloudless night, so I had no frame of reference.
Number 4.
My dad and I were hunting in the mountains north of Idaho City. It was about twilight and we were hiking back to the car. We began to smell something terrible. Like burning bone and hair. It was the worst stench I've ever experienced. The smell got worse as we kept hiking. We could hear what we thought was someone or something running at a great rate of speed from behind us. My dad grabbed me and held my face to his chest and dropped to the ground. I held close to him as the running got louder. Dad readied his rifle. I heard him say, "Oh no. Son, stand up. Walk with me, look at the ground." Terrified I stood. Stupid me turned around and looked. There were the remains of an elk. The head looked like it had been put in a blast furnace. The hair on the body was all singed. The hooves looked melted. The running was gone. We moved closer to the car. It was now nearly dark. About 100 yards from the car, we heard the running again and we froze. All of a sudden the forest lit up like noon. We heard a very loud whoosh, and it was gone. The forest was dark. It was quiet. Dead still. We booked it in the car. Threw our gear in the back seat and drove. I kept my head down and just cried. Dad was stoic and silent. Halfway out of the woods we saw the light again. Bright as ever. But just for a second. And then it was gone again. Made it back to Idaho City and stopped at the Gold Mine Grill to regroup. Went inside and there was another hunter in there. He looked at us and said, "Y'all see that shit?" He just stared and drank.
Number 5.
I've been dealing with seeing stuff like this for practically my entire life. I deal with hypnagogia, which is a condition that causes me to have extremely vivid hallucinations as I begin to fall asleep. Ever since I was about 7 I have dealt with seeing monsters, ghosts, aliens and pretty much anything else my mind could cook up, all hanging out in my bedroom. Needless to say, it scared the shit out of me for years. Although I've gotten used to it and generally ignore the things I now see, one story sticks with me. My great uncle Bob died when I was 8. The night after his funeral, I dreamed he walked past my bedroom door, wearing entirely white. He stopped and looked in on me, and then with a smile continued down the hall. I remember it being the first time I experienced one of these dreams and wasn't scared. Well, the next morning at breakfast, completely unprompted, my mom talked about this wonderful dream she had where Bob came into her room and sat with her. That was too much for me. I exploded into tears and was inconsolable. The thought that I had then, and I still sometimes deal with today. If Bob was really there, what other things that I had seen were really there too?
Number 6.
First one, I was with friends and we all saw it. We were hanging out at a park at night being typical teenagers, and saw a series of red, blue, green, and white lights spinning slowly in the sky. We couldn't see the actual aircraft, but the way the lights were spinning it gave off the impression that it was a plate-shaped object. We all basically stared at it in silence for 45 seconds or so until it just disappeared. Second time was by myself. I was laying out in my backyard and saw a silver disc in the sky. I thought it was a weather balloon at first, but then it started moving very quickly in a triangular pattern. You know the 3 points in a triangle. Picture it going from each point very quickly, taking a quick pause at each point. Like the first time, I watched it for about a minute until it vanished. Third time, I was at a party, being held in a garage. I stepped out to the end of the driveway so I could make a call, and saw a slightly reflective black plate-shaped object hovering in the sky. At this point I was basically annoyed, like what the F? How many times am I gonna see these things and be scared shitless by them? Anyways, I watched it for a longer time than the first two, about 3 minutes, and then the sky flashes blue, picture a heat lighting type flash but blue, and it was gone. I asked the partygoers if they saw anything weird and they just said yeah, that random lighting. It's been 4 years since the last time I saw one. I'm pretty convinced I live near some secret military testing place or something. To see a UFO once is crazy, 3 times is almost unbelievable. I'm glad it hasn't happened again though, cause it's pretty scary to see.
Number 7.
Mine was a ghost. I was about 19. My grandmother had died less than a month prior. We were having a family gathering unrelated to her passing. I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up late watching some old Nick at Night reruns on their old tube. I drifted off on the couch around 2 a.m., partly wrapped in a rough green and brown handmade blanket a friend had made for me. I woke up between 3 and 4 a.m., felt cold and groggy. Looked up and saw my grandmother. "Go upstairs and sleep in a proper bed," she says. "Get moving." I picked up my blanket and dragged it behind me up the steep stairs. She looked better than when I had last seen her alive, but equally as insistent and daunting. I didn't dare refuse. Didn't occur to me until the next morning that she was, in fact, still dead, since this was the kind of thing she would do regularly before she passed.
Number 8.
Commenter. When I was deployed to Afghanistan, one of my frequent tasks was to help the guy flying the Raven, small UAV with an IR camera on it, at night, looking for insurgents planting bombs in the roads. Usually pretty boring. One night, however, we noticed a circular hot spot in the corner of the camera's view. After flying around a bit to get a better view, me and the operator were wondering what in the hell this featureless hot sphere was. In white/cold black/hot, this thing was solid, darkest black, and was unmoving for about 5 minutes. After which it rapidly moved down, nearly to the ground. We were flying at about 1,600 feet AGL, then back up into the sky and out of range of the Raven. We called up the TOC about this UFO, they said it must have been a glitch, they had nothing on satellite view in that area. When we went back to review the footage, kept on a specialized Toughbook laptop, the 5 minutes with the UFO in it were missing. Person B. I've read some very creepy stories from deployed men in Afghanistan. One of my students, I used to teach college courses, told me that he was on fire watch and saw a man approaching base from the empty desert. He yelled at him to stop. The man bent backwards and started to dislocate all his joints and crawl towards them. They raised their weapons and the thing evaporated. The weird thing was that it registered on the heat detection until it disappeared and several guys saw it. It wasn't just sleepy, stressed fire watch brains.
Number 9.
Okay, so I have a story that happened to me and my friends. To set the scene, we were on a Boy Scout camping/shooting trip. There were 20 to 30 of us. We were in a little cabin thing with windows on the front and back, and a front and back door. There were wooden tables all around the area. The adult cabin, with the bathroom, was about 1/8 of a mile down a gravel road in the dark. There was obviously a buddy system, because it's Boy Scouts. So it's around midnight and everyone has been telling scary stories, like normal camping trips. Well, I had to go to the bathroom, and asked my friend to come along. He said sure, and he got our knives. We knew that there were bears in the woods, and it made us feel safer. Well, we went to the bathroom, and began our walk back. This is where it got scary. I felt an instinctual, not sure if that's the right word, fear. I looked at my friend, and he had the same look as me. We begin to walk a little faster, and unfold our pocket knives. I then turn around, and see it. It looked similar to a cat, but it was 6 feet tall, and was on its hind legs, kinda hunched over. I freaked the heck out and started running. My friend sees it too, and we sprint back to the cabin. It began making a moaning/howling noise, it was somewhere between the two, and followed us slowly. We pound on the door, and the guys let us in. We told them what we saw, and they actually believed us. So we locked the front door, and looked at the back door. It had no lock. We pushed a table up against it, and had a kid there with his knife, for safety. We drew the blinds on all the windows that had them, one of them didn't, and we sat there, with all the lights on. Then we see the eyes outside of the windows without blinds. We all were shitting ourselves, and the thing slowly walked to the back door. We heard it bumping up against it, maybe trying to open it, we think. It then left, but we still thought we were going to die. No one slept. When the adults came to wake us up, we told them and they laughed and said we were making it up. We know it happened, even if they don't believe us. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.